The Dallas Mavericks finally got Luka Doncic a true secondary star. They tried with Kristaps Porzingis, and it didn't work. They had Jalen Brunson, and they let him walk. They brought in Christian Wood, and he's been good, but he is not Kyrie Irving, and now Luka has that. At the same time, two really good complementary pieces in Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, alongside some picks, are heading back to Brooklyn. So let's talk about the trade. Let's talk about why Brooklyn are in a pretty good spot moving forward, even with only KD left of the KD, Kyrie, and James Harden trio, and why Dallas might look better on paper with the addition of Kyrie, but might have some problems moving forward this season and beyond. Let's start in Brooklyn. Kyrie is gone. James Harden has been gone. KD is the only big name left in town. This is officially KD's team. And KD's never had a situation like this in a long time in his career, not since the early days, where he wasn't even truly asserted as a star yet. Obviously, he played in Golden State, where he was amongst stars. He's played in Brooklyn, where he's been amongst stars. This is truly KD's team. The next best player is nowhere near star level. Then you're looking at a Ben Simmons, depending on how highly you rank him. You're looking at Spencer Dinwiddie, a Dorian Finney-Smith, a Royce O'Neal, and Nick Claxton. There's a lot of nice complementary pieces on this team now, but there's no star like KD. So KD needs to stay healthy, but if he can, it's KD's team, and he's going to be able to show out and be as elite as he's ever been. So now the question is, without Kyrie, how does this team fare? And to be completely honest, I like the fit of this team a lot more and the construction of this team a lot more without Kyrie on the roster. And that's not discrediting Kyrie, because Kyrie is more talented than any of the individual pieces in return for him in this trade. But that being said, Brooklyn's problem has always been depth and defense. That's always been their biggest concern. And this does not address their lack of a backup big, but it does address the fact that they needed more wing play. Royce O'Neal was a brilliant addition in the offseason, and he's been a very valuable piece of their team. He provides with a little bit of secondary playmaking, but can hit some threes at a fairly good clip, can play some very good defense. And now you bring in Dorian Finney-Smith, who's another one of those counterparts in the West alongside Royce O'Neal, who's been one of those guys over the last couple of years who's been a really good 3-and-D wing. He's got some term left on his deal, as he was just recently given an extension. And he now comes in as going to provide some very valuable 3-and-D presence for Brooklyn. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, that role remains to be seen. But either way, he is going to be extremely valuable. It's going to take some defensive load off of KD, even some more defensive load off of Royce O'Neal or Ben Simmons. And it's going to help this Brooklyn team be even that much more defensively sound. When you take away a poor defender in Kyrie and add someone like Dorian Finney-Smith, and you have a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and Nicholas Claxton behind them, this team is starting to legitimately look like they could be a good to great defensive team with the right personnel and the right rotations. Now, as far as the addition of Spencer Dinwiddie goes, obviously he was formerly a Net under a very different coaching staff, a very different front office, a very different play style before the stars had arrived and since left, other than KD. But whether he starts, comes off the bench as a sixth-man role, he's going to replace some of that production from Kyrie. He is not a direct replacement for Kyrie, but is going to be that in a sense, in terms of needs to provide some playmaking, whether it be as a primary playmaker or as a secondary playmaker. He's going to have to provide some scoring as well. They're going to need his 16, 17, 18 a night to help replace some of the scoring loss from Kyrie. Is he Kyrie? No. But he replaces a lot of what he does in enough capacity that you can at least stay afloat from a playmaking and creation standpoint without him. That alongside KD and alongside some of the likes of Ben Simmons playmaking and Seth Curry's shot creation, that you're going to have enough to supplement the loss of Kyrie. Initially, when I thought Kyrie was getting traded, I thought it was smartest for Brooklyn to commit to the rebuild, trade KD, and just salvage what you have now. With this return, they have guys who are under term beyond this season. They added more flexibility for themselves in the trade market and look like they can remain competitive this year and beyond with KD on the roster. So as long as KD is happy, they can continue to make a run for it. Are they going to be at the Milwaukee Bucks Boston Celtics, Philadelphia 76ers level, that's going to remain to be seen. We're going to have to wait to see until KD is back and how they look. But they have potential to still be a legitimate threat in the East. But on to the fun part of this trade. Kyrie Irving is playing alongside Luka Doncic. That's now a thing, which is pretty wild to think about. Something about that pairing just doesn't seem realistic in my head. Not that it won't work, it just doesn't seem like a pairing that I ever expected to happen. But here we are, Luka Doncic is playing alongside the best player he's ever played with in Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is the number 2 guy in the league. I mean, he's been on some very good teams as the number 2 guy alongside LeBron and has had a lot of success doing so. Obviously, the biggest question is just going to be how Luka and Kyrie actually fit together. Luka has been the guy his entire career. And as mentioned previously, he has played with some other borderline all-star caliber guys in Kristaps and Jalen Brunson, and now this year Christian Wood. Not that he's borderline all-star, but good offensive production. Kyrie's a whole other animal. Even though Kyrie isn't a true point guard these days, I would consider him more of a shooting guard. He is a guard. He can be quite ball dominant, and he's definitely the most ball dominant player that he's ever played with. I mean, even compared to Jalen Brunson last year, Brunson wasn't allowed to fully break out of his shell. It isn't the same as we're seeing with the Knicks this year. Not to say that Brunson didn't necessarily have some of those capabilities last year. He just wasn't given the chance to showcase them. So the question is, what do they allow Kyrie to showcase in this offense, and how much does Luka allow Kyrie to showcase his own abilities? Regardless of how that plays out, I'd imagine this offense is still going to be very successful, but there could be some chemistry issues to sort out. But chemistry aside, the offense is going to be very good. You have Luka and Kyrie. Some of those other pieces, yeah, questionable, not great, but Christian Wood's still there, Tim Hardaway Jr. is still there. You have a lot of talent that is going to get you a lot of buckets. The biggest question for me is, how does the depth work and how does the defense work? Because you just traded away Spencer Dinwiddie, who's being replaced by Kyrie Irving, essentially, which is a big improvement, but then you just traded away your best wing on a team that doesn't really have good wings. You have Dorian Finney-Smith, who's now been moved. You have Reggie Bullock, who started the year pretty poor from 3 and has been better since. And you have Josh Green, who isn't a big wing. He's definitely not going to be down there guarding 4s. Neither is Bullock, ideally. That was more Dorian Finney-Smith's role. So you're in a spot now where you're running pretty big at the 4. You're running Kleba. You're running Christian Wood with Dwight Powell lineups potentially. You're going to have to be pretty big at the 4 to get things done, which A, is going to hurt your spacing a little bit. But more concerningly, I'm worried about the defense. Because Christian Wood is not good defensively. Luka's not great defensively. Kyrie's not very good defensively. Those guys play a lot of minutes. Those guys might all be starting. Luka and Kyrie will. Christian Wood still very well may stay in the starting lineup. And that defense is not going to be good, not to mention the fact that the quality of that depth is pretty poor. If I'm the Mavericks, you have traded for Kyrie. Kyrie is not under contract beyond this season, and there have been no indications given to the media as of right now that the Mavericks have a clear intention of re-signing Kyrie regardless of what happens in the playoffs and throughout the remainder of the season. There is a realistic world where the Mavericks just traded away Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, a future first, and 2 seconds for a few months of Kyrie Irving. There's no guarantee the Mavericks even make the playoffs. That's how tight the West is right now. There's a world where they traded all that away for Kyrie to lose in the play-in. That's a realistic situation that we have to consider when you truly evaluate the gives and takes of this trade. So if I am the Mavericks, you are committing to this year with Kyrie and Luka. You are not committing beyond this year yet. Kyrie is here for a few months. You have to commit to this team this year. You just have to. So I believe they have another first-round pick they can move. You might have to look to move that. Someone like Christian Wood, if they don't really care to re-sign him past this season, that might be a move they look to make, because even though that's a re-signing for next season, Christian Wood doesn't fit this team. He does on the offensive end, but they don't need that offense. Not at that level. They have their two guys offensively, and they need someone who can protect the paint. Period. They need someone who can protect the paint, can grab a rebound, and if they can get involved in a pick and roll game with Luka and Kyrie, perfect. They don't need everything that Christian Wood brings offensively. Now, is Wood's value going to be enough to get you what you need? That's a question, but it's something they need to explore. Tim Hardaway Jr., similarly, solid scorer, has an extension, is making decent money. If you can move that and make the salaries match to get a few complementary pieces, some guys who can shoot a bit and play some defense, then they need to explore those options. And those options may not exist, and so the moves may not be made. But the Mavericks need to explore their options because the West is wide open right now. There is no clear number one in the West. The Warriors haven't been great. The Nuggets have been very good, but their defense in the playoffs could cause concerns. Memphis looks like the team to beat, but they've been terrible over the last few weeks. It's wide open. It is absolutely wide open. If the Mavericks get on a run, if they make the right moves, they could make an NBA Finals. They could. So as much as the Mavericks have already made a big splash, they already got Kyrie. I think it is foolish to say that the Mavericks are done for the trade deadline. They could be, but they're definitely not done phoning GMs across the league, answering calls from front offices across the league. They have more decisions they need to make, and if they can get them, they need to get more assets and slightly shift the roster construction of this team to better fit around the fact that they don't have one guy now. They have two in Luka and Kyrie, and they need to make sure that the roster complements that. And that might mean moving off of Christian Wood. That might mean moving off of Tim Hardaway Jr. Regardless of what they do or don't do, this Dallas team is going to be extremely fun to watch. I personally can't wait to see Kyrie and Luka play together and see how that actually works on a basketball court. But they're going to have a dynamic offense. The question is, how good? But more importantly, how does their depth hold out? How is their wing defense? And how is their just defense as a whole? Because that's some very glaring issues. And without any more moves before the trade deadline on Thursday, those are some issues that definitely could prove to be the downfall of the Dallas Mavericks this season.